Many people label the pre-internet era as inconvenient, but they missed its true magic. It was a time of genuine presence where happiness wasn't filtered and energy was raw. Those years offered a profound freedom that screens can't replicate. Today, let's bring back the feelings, the happiness, and the energy of a time gone by. Communication, the threads of connection and the weight of the written word. Close your eyes and allow your mind to drift back to an old, familiar living room, where a beige landline phone was sitting atop a hand-embroidered lace tablecloth. The very first sound that likely resurfaces in your memory is the steady, rhythmic of the dial tone, that mechanical heartbeat signaling that the outside world was ready and waiting to listen to you. We all remember the coiled cord, that iconic spiral of plastic that we would unconsciously wrap tighter and tighter around our fingers as our conversations stretched into the late hours of the night. In those days, communication wasn't a series of effortless taps on a cold glass surface. It was a feat of mechanical movement. Your finger had to find its way into each specific hole of the rotary dial, pulling it in a perfect circle and then waiting with forced patience as the mechanism whirred its way back to the starting position before you could dial the next digit. This physical interaction made every call feel intentional, every connection feel earned. Whenever we felt the need to send a message that carried more weight or formality, we turned to the manual typewriter. The sharp, rhythmic of metal type bars striking the ink-soaked ribbon was the soundtrack of productivity. And who could forget the cheerful ding of the bell as the carriage reached its limit, prompting you to manually slide it back to begin a new line? These were the sounds of a generation that understood that expression required effort. But perhaps the most exquisite form of communication was the handwritten letter. A letter possessed its own unique sensory profile, the scent of fresh stationery mingled with the faint aroma of ink, and occasionally, the subtle secret perfume of the sender. Every postage stamp pressed onto the corner of an envelope was a guarantee of a sentiment about to travel hundreds or even thousands of miles to reach its recipient. The memory of pre-internet communication is also inextricably linked to the desperate search for privacy within a shared household. Because the phone was usually stationed in the most central, observable part of the house, talking to a special someone often turned into a quiet expedition. You would try to stretch that coiled cord to its absolute limit, snaking it through doorways and around corners so you could tuck yourself away in a dark closet or hide beneath the dining table. There, surrounded by the smell of coats or old wood, every whispered word became sacred, an intimate treasure shared in the shadows. Communication in the past operated at the deliberate speed of waiting. A letter sent into the world might take a week or more to receive a response. Yet, it was precisely this long, agonizing silence that cultivated the true value of every word. When writing, you were forced to distill your thoughts and weigh your sentences carefully, knowing that every word you penned would be cherished and read over and over again by the recipient under the warm glow of an oil lamp or beside a sun-drenched window. Today, as we collapse the world into instant messaging apps, we may seem closer in physical distance, but we have drifted further apart in terms of empathy. Short, fragmented text and soulless emojis often cheapen our dialogues. We have lost the thrill of waiting for the postman to turn the corner, and we have lost the deep appreciation for letters stained with the passage of time. The mental investment required for analog communication remains the greatest gift of the past. It taught us that when you speak to someone, you must give them your entire presence and your whole soul, rather than multitasking while scrolling through an endless digital feed. Information. Retrieval treasures hidden within the library's heart. In an age where every answer to every question is tucked neatly into our pockets, it is difficult for the younger generation to imagine that knowledge was once something that had to be hunted with physical strength and unwavering persistence. In the pre-digital era, knowledge did not manifest as a series of glowing blue hyperlinks. Instead, it resided in the solemn, hallowed silence of public libraries, in dusty secondhand bookstores that smelled of aging paper, and in the heavy leather-bound volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica that held an honor place in the family living room. The process of searching for information back then was akin to an archaeological excavation. Your only navigational tool was the small wooden drawers filled with card catalogs. You had to let your fingers dance across those worn index cards, searching for the specific call number before trekking across vast rows of towering shelves to find the exact document you needed. There were moments when you had to climb a rolling wooden ladder, inhaling the scent of dry paper dust to reach a specific chapter of history. The act of flipping through pages and manually cross-referencing sources trained our minds in the art of meticulous observation. For many, the most beautiful memory remains those Saturday afternoons where one would simply disappear between the walls of books. You might have entered the library with the singular goal of finding data for a science essay, only to be accidentally seduced by an old memoir or an atlas of the world showing unexplored lands. The sensation of uncovering a precious nugget of information after hours of searching felt like finding a rare pearl in the vastness of the ocean. That happiness was tangible and real because it was the hard-earned reward for a period of sustained intellectual labor. Have you ever wondered why we seem to remember what we learned back then so much more vividly? The answer lies in the effort. When we have to break a sweat to acquire knowledge, the brain automatically etches it deeper into our consciousness. While modern tools provide results in the blink of an eye, those facts often slip through our memory very quickly. In contrast, traditional information retrieval forced us to think, to question, and to analyze with profound depth. Those days didn't just teach us facts and figures, they taught us how to respect the truth and value every printed line. Knowledge was a tangible asset, heavy, significant, and preserved through paper, rather than being mere fragile bits of data floating in a cloud. Music, the melody of tapes and the essence of personal identity. Music in the pre-internet era was a physical entity that you could hold in the palm of your hand. It was the age of shiny black vinyl records with intricate grooves, where even a tiny scratch created a rhythmic pop and crackle that felt like the very breath of time. It was the era of the cassette tape, the Walkman, and the first CDs that shimmered like rainbows under the afternoon sun. Perhaps nothing can truly replace the romance of a handmade mixtape. It was considered the ultimate love language of the time. To create a tape for a loved one, you had to sit by the radio all evening, finger poised over the record button, waiting for that specific favorite melody to play. You had to calculate every second so the song wouldn't be cut off by the DJ's voice. And then you would spend hours meticulously decorating the paper J card with ink and markers. Giving someone a mixtape meant you were giving them hours of your heart's devotion and your deepest attention. The feeling of walking into a record store was an unforgettable sensory experience. You would pick up an album, admire the artwork on the cover, read every tiny credit on the back, and feel the artist's spirit before even hearing the first note. The record shelf in your room was essentially a resume of your soul. It declared who you were, what you loved, and what you dreamed about. The craft of music extended into the most mundane habits. Using a pencil to manually wind tangled tape or using a soft cloth to wipe the dust off a vinyl record before lowering the needle. These actions turned listening to music into a respectful ritual. You couldn't easily hit skip like you can on modern apps. You listened to an entire album, understanding the narrative the artist wanted to tell from the first track to the final note. Today's explosion of streaming platforms offers a massive archive, but that abundance often dilutes the emotion. Music has unintentionally become background noise for other activities, rather than a primary, prioritized experience. We may have thousands of songs in our pockets, yet we rarely know every lyric or every drum beat the way we did with those old, worn-out tapes. Music in the non-internet era was a personal heritage, a piece of our souls that we have preserved through the ups and downs of life, reminding us of a time when the spirit was nourished by meticulousness and the purest form of passion. If the melodies of cassette tapes or the scent of old letter paper are making your heart flutter, don't hesitate to hit the hype button right below this video. Movies and television, when time was a sacred promise. Before we had infinite film libraries tucked into a remote control, television and movies were immovable temporal landmarks. The TV set, often encased in a heavy wooden cabinet, was the soul of the living room, the place where the entire family gravitated during cozy evenings. The weekend ritual often began with a pilgrimage to the video rental store, most iconically, Blockbuster. It was a literal paradise with towering shelves filled with colorful VHS boxes. You would walk the aisles, running your fingers along the spines, reading the synopsis on the back, and praying that the newly released Blockbuster still had one copy left on the shelf. For children, the true cathedral appeared every Saturday morning with Saturday morning cartoons. Because there was no YouTube to rewatch episodes and no rewind function for live broadcasts, we learned that missing an appointment meant missing out entirely. If you weren't in front of the screen at exactly 8 a.m., you would miss the adventures of your favorite heroes and have to wait an entire week for another chance. It was the very rigidity of the broadcast schedule that taught us to cherish every moment of presence. And when discussing films, how can we forget the magical atmosphere of the movie theater? It was a place of brilliant red velvet curtains, the steady whirring of the projector from the back of the room, and the thick scent of buttered popcorn that filled the air. Even more exciting were the drive-in theaters, where you sat in the family car under a starlit sky, listening to the movie's audio through a small speaker hung on the window. Legendary films like Jaws or Star Wars have become community events. You didn't watch them alone. You participated in a collective experience where hundreds of people held their breath, cheered or wept together in the exact same moment. Today, the rise of streaming platforms has turned movies into an overabundant commodity. We can watch anything, anywhere on a tiny tablet, but that convenience has stripped away the soul of the event. The ability to pause a film at any time makes us prone to distraction. Television in the old days created an invisible but unbreakable social bond. The cinema or the small screen served as a cathedral for shared imagination, bringing people closer together in a physical, real-world space. Social games, the warmth of physical presence. In an era where connection is often defined as logging into a remote server, we sometimes forget that the greatest games ever played took place right on the living room floor or out on the grass. Our pre-internet world was built from worn-out Monopoly boards, coffee-stained playing cards, and the echoes of hide-and-seek or jump rope ringing through the neighborhood. Gaming back then was a face-to-face contest of both intellect and emotion. When sitting around a Monopoly board and every decision to buy a property or collect rent led to fiery debates, dramatic negotiations, and boisterous laughter. The raw jokes, the subtle side-eye, or the last-minute turnarounds could only be fully savored when we could see each other's faces. Humans connected through the warmth and energy of the friends sitting right beside them. Even when the first video games arrived, they remained deeply tied to physical social interaction. Think back to the NES, and a Nintendo Entertainment System, where two children sat shoulder to shoulder in front of a small TV, hands gripping controllers with tangled wires. Or slightly later, the LAN parties, where we would laboriously haul massive computer towers to each other's houses, stringing cables across the floor to play together in the same room. The screams of victory, the real high fives of a successful co-op mission, or the playful punch to the shoulder after a loss are things the internet can never truly simulate. Shopping, a journey of the senses. In the pre-tech era, if you wanted to buy something, you had to step out of your house. With the exception of pizza, almost no home delivery services existed. Shopping wasn't a series of soulless clicks while lying in bed. It was a true journey for the senses, an important social event in daily life. At the heart of all activity was the brilliant department store, the bustling local market, or the sprawling shopping mall. Shopping began the moment you entered the store, inhaling the characteristic scent of new clothes, fabrics, and the perfume lingering in the air. You didn't view images through a screen. You used your hands to touch the material, feeling its thickness, softness, or texture. You stood before the mirror in the fitting room, turning around to see exactly how that outfit fit your body. The process of comparing prices or finding the perfect item was an engaging manual task. You had to walk from one store to another, memorizing prices, talking directly to salespeople for advice, or occasionally haggling a bit. Every item purchased was the result of a process of careful investigation and selection. The most beautiful memories are often tied to shopping for new school clothes or during holiday seasons. These were family trips where children were excited to try on new shoes, while parents carefully inspected every stitch. Shopping back then became a ritual of celebration, a way to mark milestones of growing up or special occasions in the year. In contrast to the lazy convenience of modern e-commerce, where everything is just a collection of polished, edited photos, traditional shopping offered absolute authenticity. You connected with the local community through short conversations with shop owners, and you learned how to interact and behave in public. The value of the past lies in that journey of communication. Owning an item became more meaningful when it was tied to the memory of a trip, a friendly salesperson's face, or an afternoon spent with friends at the mall. It was a full life experience where humans interacted and immersed themselves in the rhythm of the world around them in the most tangible way. Do you still keep any VHS tapes in your cabinet? Or do you remember the thrill of waiting for those Saturday morning cartoons? Please leave a comment to share your most memorable memories. Cooking, the flavors of memory and the heritage of the soul. Take a deep breath and let your sense of smell lead you back to a small kitchen in the 50s or 60s. There you will find treasures hidden within worn recipe notebooks, pages stained with grease and smudged with ink from hands busy kneading dough. This was the legacy of grandmothers and mothers, those who didn't need a tablet to learn how to cook. They cooked with intuition, with the feeling in their hands, and with love passed down through generations. Every page of those cookbooks told a story. Yellowed stains on the corner of a page marked a vibrant Christmas with a roasted turkey, or hasty folds recording the moment a mother was on the phone while scribbling down a friend's baking secret. Learning to cook back then was a poetic, oral process. You will forever remember the excitement of your mother running to the neighbor's house with a small scrap of paper to ask for the recipe of a fragrant stew she smelled drifting over the fence. That sharing wasn't just about a recipe, it was community connection and respect for each other's craft. Family dinners in the old days carried a completely different atmosphere. At the table, the only presence was the sound of clinking silverware, laughter, and the aroma of food fresh from the oven. There was no blue light from phones, no message notifications interrupting the flow of conversation. All attention was focused on the flavors and the beloved faces around the table. A child back then learned how to taste every spoonful of sauce, adjusting the seasoning themselves and understanding that good food requires time and patience. Cooking was an experimental process where early mistakes became precious lessons. Looking at the present, social media platforms like TikTok provide tens of thousands of 15-second cooking tutorials. Everything looks glossy, fast, and easy, but it seems that cooking has become an act of copy-pasting rather than a creative process imbued with personal identity. We cook according to what the screen tells us, but we lack the soul of emotional heritage. A dish from a mother's notebook carries an entire sky of memories that no 4K video can replicate. News, the world through paper, and the silence for reflection. Do you remember the familiar thump on the porch every early morning? That was the sound of a thick newspaper being tossed by the carrier, marking the start of a new day. Before the world was besieged by 24/7 streaming news, catching up on information was a slow and solemn ritual. The image of a father sitting with a steaming cup of coffee, his face hidden behind large newsprint pages, remains an icon of tranquility in the old era. News back then didn't come from algorithms or clickbait headlines. It came from newspapers, from vibrantly colored magazines like Life or Time, and from the 6 p.m. television news, a time when the whole country seemed to stop together to listen to a single trusted voice. Although sources were fewer than they are now, they carried the weight of credibility. Editors spent the entire day verifying, writing, and editing with the utmost care before placing information in the hands of readers. The memory of reading the news also involved a physical sensation. You flipped every page, your hand slightly smudged with ink, and you took the time to read a deep analysis in its entirety. There was no scroll button, no pop-up ads obscuring your view. It was precisely this slowness that gave our brains a precious silence to reflect, to question, and to understand issues rather than reacting instantaneously. In the modern world, we live in an ocean of information, but often feel thirsty for the truth. Fake news, fiery debates, and social media chaos keep people in a state of constant stress. Yet algorithms intentionally push us into filter bubbles where we only see what we want to see, leading to deep societal divisions. We consume news too quickly, resulting in a shallow mindset where every event only exists in the mind for a few minutes before being replaced by the next sensation. The non-internet era taught us that knowing less but understanding more deeply is sometimes much better than knowing everything but understanding the essence of nothing. It was an era of faith and respect for knowledge, where every page bore the breath of the real world in an authentic and responsible way. Photography, cherishing moments and tangible heritage. Imagine holding an old Kodak or Fujifilm camera in your hands. The feeling when you wind the film, hearing the crisp click of the shutter and the whir of the film spool inside, was a truly enchanting mechanical experience. In the pre-internet age, photography wasn't about taking hundreds of shots to find the best one. It was the art of observation and frugality. Because every roll of film was limited to 24 or 36 exposures, every click of the shutter was an economic and emotional decision. You had to look closely, wait for the perfect light, and hold your breath to keep your hands steady. That caution taught us to cherish the present moment. You truly looked at the world through the lens rather than merely trying to record it. Taking a photo back then was a commitment that this moment was truly worthy of accompanying you for the rest of your life. And how could we forget the anticipation of taking a roll of film to the 1-hour Photoshop? That could be the longest hour of your life, where your imagination soared regarding what you had captured. When holding the stack of freshly developed photos, the feeling of flipping through each one, inhaling the characteristic chemical scent, and smiling at a slightly blurry moment or a spontaneous laugh was a happiness beyond compare. Those photos would then be tenderly placed into thick family album, where every picture had a story to tell, a specific date recorded in ink on the back. In the modern tech era, the phone in your pocket can hold tens of thousands of high-quality photos. We take pictures of everything, but ironically, we rarely look back at them. Digital photos often die in phone memory or are forgotten in the cloud. In contrast, old film photos are considered heritage. They are objects you can pass around during family gatherings, things that when you flip through them, you feel the warmth of time and loved ones who have gone away. If you also own an old album filled with the radiant smiles of the past, or remember the excitement of waiting at the photo development shop, please share this video to spread those memorable moments together. Travel, the journey of paper maps and true adventure. Travel before the age of Google Maps and TripAdvisor was a true adventure, a test of human mettle and curiosity. Our primary navigational tools were large paper maps that, when opened, blocked your entire view, and were always a massive challenge to fold back exactly as they were. Along with those were vibrantly colored brochures and hotel catalogs sent through the mail. The process of planning a trip back then was an engaging journey of communication. You had to call directly to book a room, talking to a stranger on the other end about prices and location. You relied on advice from friends or newspaper ads. Once on the road, you were completely disconnected from your familiar world. With no GPS to guide you meter by meter, you were forced to use your powers of observation and your instinct for orientation. Rolling down the car window to ask a local for directions was both a way to find your path and the start of a conversation, a smile, and sometimes a lead to a wonderful restaurant not found in any guidebook. The most memorable parts of traveling back then were perhaps the times you got lost. Today, getting lost is an annoying inconvenience, but back then, getting lost was part of the journey. Wrong turns often led us to unexpected majestic scenery, peaceful small villages, or interesting chance encounters. It was these unplanned surprises that created the soul of the trip, turning it into a story worth telling after returning. You had to learn how to manage on your own, how to find your way, and even how to cook in nature if the trip was a bit wild. In the current world, the presence of GPS, Airbnb, or booking apps makes everything too perfect and easy. We know exactly where we are going, where we are staying, and what we will eat before we even set foot there. That convenience has unintentionally stripped away the adventure and mystery of the journey. Travel today is sometimes just moving from point A to point B in the most optimal way, rather than a process of discovering oneself and the world around them directly. The trips of the non-internet era built vivid memories because they were made of effort, curiosity, and even lovely mistakes. It was an era when going far meant truly going. For log years, we realized that the lack of connection to the web led to a deeper connection to each other. Cherish your memories, stay present, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Back to Yesterday. Until next time, keep the spirit alive. Until